When you look at franchises, that first entry is where everything starts to click. It's where the idea becomes real. But completing a trilogy, that's the real milestone. In my last video, I brought up Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy because you could literally see the progress from film to film. And honestly, it reminded me a lot of the Crash trilogy in the 90s. In the first game, we got acquainted with Crash, spinning onto the scene, making a name for itself, even though Sony Japan wasn't exactly his biggest fan, at least not until they saw that first Crash Bandicoot paycheck. Then Crash 2 Cortex Strikes Back came along and massively improved the formula. It took what worked in the first game, ditched a lot of the frustrating stuff, and delivered what I still consider the most balanced entry in the trilogy. It felt smoother, it felt more fair, and it felt like the game Naughty Dog wanted the first one to be. But that was only step 2, because the next entry doesn't just improve, it evolves. Crash 3 runs with innovation, more skills, more variety, more creativity, and it even opens the door for Coco to be a playable character while still keeping Crash at the forefront. Compared to the first 2 games, this is the one that feels like the complete package, the Crash game where everything comes together. Welcome to episode 3 of the Naughty Dog Takeover. Today, we're collecting relics in Crash Bandicoot Warped.
Okay, watch and learn.
Oh, I'm learning alright.
Ellie, stay up, come on! What? Is that it?
You asked for it.
Welcome back to all my returning viewers, and welcome to all the new ones. If you don't know me, I'm the Retro Phantom, and every week I cover games from the past that help define our childhoods. Right now, we're smack dab in the middle of the Naughty Dog Takeover. We've got one more Crash retrospective to finish out this month. Then in February, we move to Jak and Daxter, and in March, we wrap things up with Uncharted and the first Last of Us. The Last of Us Part 2 is getting saved for the end of the year as a special finale. And it doesn't stop there. After Naughty Dog, we've got Rocksteady's Batman series, followed up by Spyro the Dragon, then Street Fighter, and I'm ending the year by finishing up my Hideo Kojima Chronicles. So yeah, this year is absolutely stacked with content coming your way. If you learned something new or enjoyed a video, dropping a like really helps the YouTube algorithm, especially since we're still growing as a channel. And if you're enjoying the long form content, hitting that subscribe button goes a long way. We're on the road to 15K subscribers this year. We're less than 2K away from 10K, and I'd love for you to be a part of the journey. And if you're feeling generous, you can always buy me a cup of coffee. The link is in the description. With that said, let's dive into this. Okay, now if this is not your first Naughty Dog video, feel free to advance this video past the recap. I'll give you a moment to do that now. As we've covered before, the story of Naughty Dog begins back in 1982 at a weekend Hebrew school in Virginia, where 2 kids preparing for their bar mitzvahs, Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, they realized they shared the same obsession, computers and video games. From the start, their skills complemented each other perfectly. Gavin lived in the code, Rubin lived in the art, and together they formed a partnership that would define an entire era of PlayStation history. Throughout the mid to late 80s, they cut their teeth making games like Math Jam, Ski Craze, and Dream Zone. None of these were massive hits, but they were crucial learning experiences. This was development with no internet, no tutorials, and no safety net. You either figured it out or you failed. The first real break came with EA, where they officially adopted the name Naughty Dog and released Thief the Thief, and later Rings of Power on the Sega Genesis. The games did well, but publisher control, expensive cartridges, and limited creative freedom left them burned out. so they walked away. That was until CD-based gaming changed everything.
Nintendo pays close attention when Sega unveils its latest technological advancement.
So Sega came out with the Sega CD. All of a sudden, games were going to be huge. They could be 600 megabytes of information.
They would return with a game called Way of the Warrior, which caught attention of Universal Interactive, and this is where opportunity started to present itself. A deal sent them packing for California, and during a cross-country drive, they jokingly pitched a concept called Sonic's Ass. That joke became Crash Bandicoot. By design, a platformer that emphasized depth, forward movement, and cinematic presentation, Naughty Dog pushed the original PlayStation harder than almost any American developer at the time. And despite skepticism from Sony Japan, including blunt criticism from Ken Kutaragi, Crash Bandicoot launched in 1996 and became a massive success. By 1997, it has sold over 1.5 million copies, becoming the first scrolling platformer developed outside of Japan to ever hit that milestone. Crash didn't just sell well, it helped define the PlayStation's identity.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Pack up your stuff. I got a little surprise for you here. Check it out. What do you think about that? We got real-time, 3D, lush organic environments. How's that make you feel, buddy? Feel a little like your days are numbered?
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
You're hurting my elbow.
And with that success, the question wasn't if there would be a sequel, it was how Naughty Dog could possibly top it. Crash Bandicoot Cortex Strikes Back was greenlit the same month the original game released, and with a larger budget and bigger expectations, the team made a bold decision: throw out nearly all the old code and start from scratch. Using a rebuilt engine, GOOL2, the sequel ran faster, smoother, and more efficiently. The team doubled in size, level design became more deliberate, and the game focused on fixing the frustrations of the first entry rather than simply expanding it. This was also the era where Crash's identity truly locked in, thanks in part to composer Josh Mansell, whose percussion-heavy soundtrack gave the series its unmistakable rhythm and energy. It was also the game that introduced Coco Bandicoot, a character created in response to Sony Japan's discomfort with Tawna, and one who would quickly become a permanent part of the franchise. By the time Crash 2 launched in November of '97, Naughty Dog had done more than improve on the original. They proved Crash wasn't a one-hit wonder. He was a moneymaker.
These are particularly cool because they're a combination of tons of people on the team's individual efforts. You got like animators who had to do the facial expressions, the lip syncing with the dialogue, the textures. They had programmers doing like the holographic effect, the lens flare, audio, video spooling, and lip syncing. And it all comes together and brings an artificial character to life in a way that I don't think we've seen before in video games.
Now that we're all caught up, let's talk about Crash Bandicoot 3.
Coco Bandicoot, Crash's sister. This game she's going to be riding on a tiger. She's a playable character. And over here we have Tiny the Tiger, who was one of the characters in Crash 2. This is Crash in Time, so this time we're going to be fighting against Tiny in the Coliseum. He's a Roman gladiator.
Hey Mark, what's going on? We'll give you a little over here.
Great footage. Thanks for the underground footage. We'll put you in the next underground. Credits, okay?
The development of Crash started in January of 1998. Based on the continuing sales of Crash 1 as well as the smash sales of Crash 2 worldwide, the Crash series reached 5 million units. Naughty Dog would then thank Sony for this incredible run, and then at that same time they began Warped. Now, understand, while games today take years and others entire decade, Crash 3 was given a much shorter window to make a game. In just 10 and a half months, from January 1998 to November 1998, Warped was a high priority project. Game Informer captured this pressure perfectly in their feature titled Another 10 and a Half Months. When the magazine visited Naughty Dog, morale was high. According to the article, the team looked confident, energized, and ready. At the center of it all was Jason Rubin, who wasted no time in getting straight to the point. As Rubin explained to Game Informer, with Crash 2, we thought we made the ultimate Crash game. And then the question after that was, what do we do for another sequel? Additionally, what can we do in 10 and a half months? And the answer could have certainly been, just go back and make more levels of the same type. But we decided not to do that, and instead traded Sleep for a better title. That decision defined Warp. Rather than abandoning Crash's identity, the team chose to expand it carefully. Rubin explained that the programmers Andy Gavin, Stephen White, and Greg Omi began work on 3 entirely new gameplay engines. Rubin told Game Informer, there are 3 completely new gameplay engines. They're the kind of mini engines that don't play like the regular Crash levels that you're used to. They make up about a third of the game, but they do fit into the bigger Crash world. And this was important. Naughty Dog wasn't trying to turn Crash into something unrecognizable. As Rubin put it, we're not making a Die Hard trilogy here. There's always a crystal on every level. There's always a boss completion gems on every level. There's always a progression through the levels, regardless of what type of level it is. At the same time, the team knew they couldn't throw everything away. Rubin made that clear when discussing why 2/3 of the game still use classic Crash gameplay. Crash 1 and Crash 2 are the number 2 and number 3 best-selling character-based platform games on the next generation systems. So were we to abandon that style of gameplay, that would mean that we would be abandoning a significant proportion of the gamers out there. The result was a hybrid approach, classic Crash at its core, with bold experimentation layered on top. 2 of the new engines push Crash fully into the 3-dimensional gameplay, taking him into the air and out to sea, while a third placed him on a motorcycle in a driving sim-style stage. These weren't gimmicks, they were integrated into Crash's structure, complete with crystals, gems, and progression. Under the hood, Warped was also Naughty Dog's most technically ambitious game yet. Rubin went deep into detail explaining how the team pushed the original PlayStation further than most thought possible, particularly with water and depth. As Rubin explained, the Nintendo 64 has a Z buffer. Everyone said that the PlayStation would never be able to do a Z buffer. Well, in Crash 2, we proved them wrong by making a flat plane Z buffer, but we didn't want to stop there. In Crash 3, we wanted to make an arbitrary plane Z buffer. We succeeded. This breakthrough allowed Warp's jet ski levels and flooded Egyptian stages to function the way Naughty Dog originally envisioned. Waves moving naturally, reflections reacting to light, and multiple objects interacting on the screen at the same time, all while still maintaining a smooth 30 frames per second on the original PlayStation hardware. But Warped wasn't just about pushing the hardware, it was about changing how players engage with the game itself. The introduction of the Relic time trial system gave players real reason to return after the credits rolled. Mastering movement, shaving seconds of runs, and chasing better times became just as important as simply reaching the end of a level. Progression no longer stopped at completion, it demanded improvement. Boss battles were also reworked to feed directly into this loop. Instead of serving as a simple roadblock, each boss rewarded the player with a new ability. Moves like belly flops, double jumps, deft tornado spins, bazookas, and eventually running weren't just flashy upgrades. They fundamentally changed how levels were approached, especially during the time trials. By the time Crash Bandicoot Warped was shown publicly, it was clear this wasn't just another sequel. It was the result of everything Naughty Dog had learned since '96, and they refined it and unified it into a single experience.
Bandicoot is? A little cat or something like that. Some kind of a beast? A beast. Is it a big beast or a little beast? Middle size.
It's a hedgehog or something. Something like a hedgehog, I think.
Can you tell me where it's from? Africa. Definitely Africa.
I'm here with Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, guys from Naughty Dog, the creators of Crash Bandicoot, and we're talking about Crash 3, yeah?
Yeah, Crash 3.
I saw some screens on this. Amazing.
Thank you.
I mean, how much better can you guys make this game?
We tried. At this point, not that much, I'm sure. It's we got a lot of surprises, a lot of surprises that we haven't even shown here. But for now, we're really, really happy with what we've done, and yeah, we think this is the big one. This is the best of them.
We've been really focusing on like different gameplay elements and stuff, just giving the player tons of different stuff to do, like tons of different controls and like vehicles and like things to ride and like just have a lot of fun.
Now I saw an underwater level, which I thought was the best level so far of any level I've ever seen in Crash.
That's right, but we're holding our consistency. You know, Crash has got scuba gear because we all know he can't really swim.
Right.
But with the scuba gear, I guess it's okay, just like you and me.
I saw Crash being chased by this big-ass dinosaur thing, and there's some cool reflection going on there. What's that all about?
Well, beyond improving the gameplay, because we're definitely getting better with gameplay as we go into the series, we've also gotten much better at the PlayStation. How much of the PlayStation's power are we using? More than last year, you know? And one of the things that we've gotten down now is not only standing on ice reflections like we did in Crash 2, but standing knee-deep in water and having your body sort of cut off at the knees and having a reflection as it would in a pool of water. So it's our new trick. Impossible with the Z-buffer, so it's not even a fake Z-buffer now, it's beyond that.
You can see a lot more of the game. I mean, there's a lot more depth and action going on, and you know, you're going down canyons and stuff. I mean, you guys trying to like expand the world of Crash here?
We really tried to open it up and give you like broad, far view so you can get a real like panoramic sense of the world.
Crash 1 was a pretty big game. Crash 2, even bigger still. Is Crash 3 going to be an even bigger and longer game?
Absolutely. I think that Crash 3 has more levels, there's more detail in them, and we're adding some new gameplay on top of getting crystals and getting gems as you did in the past. There's now an additional thing to get. So there's going to be endless gameplay for someone who wants to get the true 100%.
What is the best part about making the Crash games? You know, pushing the limit, what's the best part about making the new Crash?
Well, those of us that have been with Crash since the beginning, we've actually spent more time now on Crash Bandicoots than we spent in college. We spent more than 4 years total by the end of this project. So we know this character well. It's like a best friend, and it's great working with a best friend. It's great doing another title where you know, I understand this world. I know what things look like in this world.
What are the total number of units sold for Crash worldwide?
Sony made a press release about a month or two ago that we had hit 5 million on 1 and 2 together. Crash 1 is the best-selling PlayStation title in America. We've really been able to hit numbers that are, you know, it's 10 games in the industry have ever done it, and it's going right back to the beginning.
Great talking to you guys.
Cool. Thank you.
After those 10 extensive months of innovation, Naughty Dog completed the trilogy with Crash Bandicoot Warped, which released on November 3rd, 1998.
Hi, I'm Jason Rubin from Naughty Dog. PlayStation Underground's asked me to tell you a little bit about Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped.
I wanted to be sure that we preserved the classic intuitive gameplay that has made the Crash series so successful. We found that gamers worldwide truly enjoy the structured interactions of this style.
The second thing we wanted to do with Crash Bandicoot Warped is that we wanted to introduce free-roaming gameplay.
To add excitement, we've created some radically new styles of levels.
You still have a mission-based objective, but at the same time, the camera is opened up and you're free roaming. In addition, we wanted to broaden the replay value of the game so that players got more for their money, they got more bang for the buck. We added a time trial mode, but now they can race against the clock, they can compete against their friends, their brothers, their sisters, and they can put up scores with their names in it to show exactly how well they've done.
In the succession from Crash 1 to Crash 2 to Crash Warped, We as a team, and I personally, have learned a tremendous number of things. In Crash 1 and 2, the maximum distance at which you could see any polygon was about 70 meters. In Crash Warped, we've opened that up to 700 and some odd meters. Like in the medieval levels, there's a castle at the end that you can see nearly from the beginning of the level, and as you go through almost a kilometer of level distance, like you keep seeing the castle every time you get closer and closer as you go over crests.
Because we've been able to achieve things that just haven't been seen before on the PlayStation. One of the accomplishments that we did in Crash Bandicoot Cortex Strikes Back is we had Crash be able to wade into water and to subdivide perfectly in the water, which is something that had really not been seen before on the PlayStation. And at first, there was some debate whether it was feasible. Now we've gone another step in Crash Bandicoot Warp, where we have entire rounds where everything is floating in the water. We have environment mapping against waves, and the waves are moving in a very realistic ocean pattern, but you can see the reflections of the world in the waves, which gives a very, very realistic effect. I think most people, including ourselves, until this project, thought it was not possible to pull off that many things, that much subdivision in a level, that you just would not have the speed to do something like that. I think the way we pulled it off was with perseverance and with trying things and just keep working at it and working at it and working at it until we were able to get within the frame rate that we wanted.
We've learned a tremendous amount about gameplay. Making a new mechanic and trying to make it play well and work with Jason's animation for the character, because it all has to integrate together. Crash is like driving along on the motorcycle, and he turns, he's got to bring the motorcycle down, put his knee on the ground like the way a real motorcycle rider does. And so there's a real interaction between the gameplay programming, controlling the feel of that motorcycle, and the animation. And that's probably one of the most important programming things. If the game doesn't feel good, if it's clunky, then it's not fun.
When we approach a level, this is an example, this is Arabian level M. It's basically somewhere about 2/3 of the way into the game. We think in terms of the player's abilities at that point, and we also think in terms of the character's abilities. One of the things we wanted to do was bounce on tarps, because bouncing is a fun mechanic. Kids love to bounce on beds, and it's just always fun to do.
We decided to do something that hadn't been done before. In Crash 2, all the enemies on the hang section you had to avoid. You couldn't specifically attack any particular enemy, and in this game, Crash will actually get to fight enemies while hanging.
Our biggest challenge has been how to add more depth and excitement. I've always been proud of how Crash's moves need to be used in combination.
The new moves, of course, are great. Well, we've got a bunch of power-ups that you gain across the game as you play, and what's really nice about that is basically the character grows as you're playing.
Crash Warped has combinations like the slide, double jump, death tornado, which add greatly to the depth of the gameplay.
At first, they'll just jump on an enemy, but after they get good at the combo, now they'll slide, jump, jump, and hover and come down on them at a much more aggressive style. The deaths are an important part of this game. What we learned in 2 is that people, if they die and there's something funny that happens at the end of it, it sort of softens the blow of taking a hit.
We have the game designers come up with their wacky ideas of what we should do, and we have the artists coming up with their additions of what would look cool with that idea or what would be best suited for that idea. Well, we start out with just a rough vignettes just to get the feel of which direction we should go, and then once we see that we're in the right environment, then we go straight to the line art, and the line art is a more finished artwork that leads eventually to being a color key, which has the actual palette of that level. So that way we can take different elements of the warped background and go to the computer and start modeling and start making textures and start applying lighting and coloring and things like that. Or I can also do a lot of palette shifts. And if, for example, I can take the daytime and I can make a nighttime version of it rather quickly.
There have been a lot of really proud moments for Naughty Dog in the Crash series, but I think maybe the proudest moment has been seeing the culmination of technical achievements and artistic achievements that came together with some of our water levels in Crash Bandicoot Warped. Our ocean level is just beautiful. I think we have a gameplay style that is truly new and truly unique. And I think that it's extremely fun, and on top of that, technically, it's an extremely hard achievement.
Well, you've crashed a few parties before, but I never expected you to make it this far.
Now I have to lay down a challenge to the PlayStation Underground viewers. I've heard that you're some of the best video game players, some of the best PlayStation players out there. And I want to see if that's actually true. The Naughty Dogs, all of the Sony testers, our Sony producers, as well as Mark Cerny, have been playing our time trial mode, and you'll be able to find in the credits of the game what all of our best times were.
You don't turn back. I will inflict 1,000 years of suffering on you and the entire universe!
And the challenge is, can you actually beat that time? And I have to say, within that group of people, there are some darn good players, so it's going to be quite a challenge. So the challenge is out to you now.
On the surface, Warp might look like an evolution of Crash 2, but in reality it's packed with meaningful updates that push the series to the next level and finally make it feel like a complete product. You can tell how much care and attention went into this game, and while we'll get into the gameplay improvements shortly because there's plenty of callbacks and refinements, we first need to talk about the story. Warp takes place immediately after the events on Cortex Strikes Back. After Crash defeats Dr. Neo Cortex, Nitrous Brio uses the 42 gems Crash collected to power a massive laser destroying the Cortex Vortex in revenge for Cortex's betrayal. But that destruction has unintended consequences. Debris from the Cortex Vortex crashes into an ancient monument, and when the dust settles, an evil entity is unleashed, finally freed after centuries of imprisonment. Back on Insanity Island, Crash, Coco, Polar, and Aku Aku are relaxing, believing the threat is over. Suddenly, sinister laughter fills the air, the sky darkens, and Aku Aku immediately knows something is wrong. He urges everyone inside and reveals the truth. His evil brother Uka Uka has been freed, and the great evil has returned to the world. Elsewhere, Dr. Neo Cortex, somehow still alive, is shown kneeling before Uka Uka, cowering as he's berated for his repeated failures. Cortex desperately tries to shift the blame onto Crash, but Uka Uka has lost his patience. With the planet's crystals and the gems already used to destroy the Cortex Vortex, there's seemingly no remaining power source left. Still, Uka Uka decides to grant Cortex one final chance, partially out of twisted generosity and partially because Cortex's failure is what freed him in the first place. At that moment, Uka Uka introduces Dr. Nefarious Trophy, the self-proclaimed master of time and the creator of the Time Twister, the very structure they stand within. Together, the trio devise a plan: travel back through time and reclaim the crystals at their original points in history. Meanwhile, inside the Bandicoot house, Aku Aku explains that long ago he managed to imprison Uka Uka deep underground. Now that his brother has escaped, he must be stopped at all costs. With the stakes clear, Crash and Coco enter the Time Twister, officially beginning their journey across time. As the adventure unfolds, Crash defeats familiar threats like Tiny Tiger and Dino Dial before eventually confronting Trophy himself. Using his control over time, Trophy attempts to erase Crash from existence, but he's ultimately defeated. With Trophy gone, even Cortex acknowledges that the Time Twister has become far too dangerous to remain intact. After collecting all the crystals and gems, Crash and Aku Aku face Cortex and Uka Uka in the core of the Time Twister. Once both villains are defeated, the machine begins to collapse, opening a massive warp portal that drags Cortex, Trophy, and Uka Uka into the prehistoric past, where Cortex and Trophy are transformed into babies, fighting over the now powerless Uka Uka. Crash, Coco, and Aku Aku narrowly escape and return home, just in time to enjoy a peaceful snowfall back at the Bandicoot house, bringing the trilogy to a light-hearted close.
It cannot be! Not a prisoner of time again! The time twister machine could not hold itself together. We were lucky to escape.
Give me the mask! With it I shall take over the world! Come on!
It is difficult to say what has happened to our enemies, but I doubt we will see them for a long time.
Now that we know the story of the game, let's talk about the gameplay. Like I mentioned earlier, Crash Bandicoot Warp plays very much like Crash 2, but with some quality of life upgrades. This is the first time in the series where Crash isn't the only protagonist. While Crash is still the main focus, certain levels allow you to play as Coco, his sister, which was a huge step forward for the series. We'll get into Coco's levels and how they're designed shortly. But first, let's talk about the Warp Room. The Warp Room returns again, but this time it's structured as a full chamber. Most of the levels are locked behind electrical gates, and just like Crash 2, you're given 5 levels per Warp Room, followed by a boss fight. Defeating a boss doesn't just move the story forward, it rewards Crash with a new ability, and these skills fundamentally change how the game is played. First up is the Super Belly Flop, which works similar to the standard Body Slam, but it hits harder and is far more effective. It uses the same input before, pressing X and circle so it feels familiar right away. Next is the Double Jump, which lets Crash straight up defy the laws of physics. By double tapping X, Crash can reach higher platforms and pull off jumps that weren't possible in the previous game. Then there's the Death Tornado Spin, a prolonged spin attack that allows Crash to hover slightly in the air. Just keep tapping square and Crash will continue spinning and spinning and spinning, making it perfect for tricky jumps and chaining movement together. Crash also becomes a long-range sniper with a bazooka, which allows him to shoot Wumpa at enemies and boxes. This makes the hard-to-reach crates easier to deal with. To use it, you hold the L2 and aim and press circle to fire. Finally, there's the Crash Dash, which lets Crash run faster than ever before. By holding R2 while running, Crash breaks into a sprint, and this ability becomes absolutely essential later on. And that brings us to one of Warp's biggest additions, time trials and relics. After completing a level for the first time, you can replay it in the time trial mode. Here, the goal is simple. Finish the level as fast as possible. Depending on your performance, you either earn a Sapphire or Gold relic. Sapphire relics are fairly forgiving, while Gold relics require real precision and mastery. During the time trials, breaking numbered crates freezes the timer. Box marked with 1, 2, or 3 will stop the clock for that many seconds. And importantly, you don't lose any lives in the time trial mode, meaning you can replay levels just as many times as you want to improve your time. To start a time trial, Crash needs to touch the stopwatch at the beginning of the level. Once you finish, the game lets you enter your name, recording your best time. These relics aren't just for bragging rights. They're essential for unlocking secret content. Much like the secret Warp Room in Crash 2, Crash 3 features 7 hidden levels. Every 5 relics unlocks another secret stage. At 5 relics, you unlock Ski Crazed. At 10 relics, Hang 'em High becomes accessible through a hidden entrance. At 15 relics, you unlock Area 51. At 20 relics, you reveal the secret entrance to Future Frenzy. At 25 relics, you gain access to Rings of Power. On top of that, the 2 additional levels making a total of 7, these require specific actions. To access Oedipus Rex, Crash must be abducted by a pterodactyl in Dynamite. And to unlock Hot Cocoa, Crash needs to get abducted by a UFO sign in Road Crash, which also introduces a full level played entirely as Coco. Now, let's talk about the level design, because this is where Warped really starts to surprise you. While the last game pushed Crash into space, Crash Bandicoot Warp pushes him through time. Instead of being locked to a single theme, Crash is jumping between eras, ancient Egypt, medieval times, the prehistoric age, and even a futuristic set of levels. Each era feels distinct, not just visually, but mechanically, and that variety keeps the game feeling fresh all the way through. For the first time in the series, Crash can swim, These underwater levels introduce new hazards like sharks, mines, pufferfish, and eels. In some stages, Crash even pilots a submarine that allows him to fire torpedoes from a distance, turning certain sections into full-on water combat zones rather than traditional platforming. On top of that, Warped introduces vehicle-based levels in a much bigger way than before. Most notably, the motorcycle stages, which were so important they ended up on the cover of the game. In these levels, Crash races at high speeds and must finish in first place to receive that level's crystal. Sharp turns are common, meaning braking becomes essential, and speed boosts can either help you dominate or send you flying into a ditch if you're not careful. Between rival racers, police cars, and environmental obstacles, these stages require precision and control, making them some of the most challenging moments in the game. Then there are Coco exclusive levels, which add even more variety. Coco primarily pilots a biplane equipped with a machine gun and barrel for evasive maneuvers. These stages focus on aerial combat, where Coco must shoot down 7 of Cortex's blimps. Enemies have surprisingly accurate aim, and when Coco takes damage, she can recover by shooting health crates. The best strategy here is a little complicated but could be simple. If enemies aren't on your screen, they can't aim at you. Positioning matters just as much as shooting. The game also brings back the classic animal riding levels, but with a twist. Coco rides a tiny tiger cub named Purra, while Crash mounts a T-Rex in the prehistoric stages. Both rides allow jumping, but they play differently. Purra can break into a sprint, while Crash can leap off the T-Rex entirely, adding some subtle variety to how these stages are approached. Much like the previous games, crystals return, with Crash needing 25 crystals to complete the main progression. Gems also make a comeback, including colored gems, which are now found in specific stages and unlock hidden paths to other levels. Clear gems are earned by breaking every box in a level, or completing secret areas with a total of 42 gems to clear in total. Bonus levels return as well, featuring Crash sprinting through compact challenges areas where the goal is to grab everything in sight. These bonus stages can be replayed as many times as you want, and importantly, you don't lose lives when playing them, making experimentation far less punishing. All of the familiar boxes return too. Bounce crates, Witch Doctor Mask, checkpoints, TNT, and Nitro. But Warp adds a new twist. Time-based boxes. If Crash doesn't act quickly, these crates can turn into steel, forcing players to move fast and plan their routes carefully, especially during time trials. Boss fights return once again, and while they're generally on the easier side, they serve their purpose. Familiar faces like Tiny Tiger, Dr. Engine, and Dr. Cortex make comebacks, while new villains are introduced. Dino Doll, which is a half dino, half crocodile, armed with a flamethrower, Dr. Nefarious Trophy, the self-proclaimed master of time, and Uka Uka, the dark inverse of Aku Aku. The quality of life upgrades also give this game some great innovation, with seeing how many boxes are in a level by hitting triangle and seeing how many more you need or are missing, unlike in the past where you had to wait until the end and get toppled by boxes. One of the most charming aspects of Warp is how packed it is with callbacks, references, and tributes. Level names alone tell a story. Ski Craze references Naughty Dog's early game, Ski Craze. Rings of Power, the final relic level, is a nod to Rings of Power, another title from their past. Road Crash is a clear homage to Road Rash, another game where you had to ride a motorcycle and race. Tomb Raider, I'm pretty sure you can guess which one that's referencing. Shout out to Lara Croft. But there's one more detail that really stood out to me. In the game's manual on page 9, there's a mention of a secret demo, and it's a big one. By entering a specific code on the title screen, up, down, left, right, square, players can unlock a playable demo of Spyro the Dragon, which had only been out for about 2 months at that time. And yes, I will be covering Spyro later this year. Between the secrets, the homages, the experimental level design, and sheer amount of content packed into this game, Crash Bandicoot Warped feels like Naughty Dog firing on all cylinders. You can tell this was made by developers who genuinely loved games and wanted to celebrate gaming through their work. That's what ultimately makes Warped feel like a complete product and different from other entries. Right out of the gate, Warped was met with near universal praise. According to Metacritic, Warped holds an aggregate score of 91 out of 100, placing it firmly in the universal acclaim territory, and looking at reviews from the time, that praise was consistent across the board. Publications like Game Informer scored the game a 9.25 out of 10, while IGN gave it a 9.1, and GameSpot followed closely with an 8.9 out of 10. Electronic Gaming Monthly rewarded the game 36.5 out of 40, and GamePro went all in with a perfect score of 5 out of 5. One of the strongest takeaways from the critics was the consensus that Warped wasn't just good, it was the best Crash game yet. GameSpot's Ryan McDonald summed it up in a way, calling it easily the best Crash yet, stating that every aspect of the game felt improved over previous entries and describing it as the most fun he's had with a 3D platform game in a long time. GamePro echoed that sentiment, calling Warped a very strong contender for PlayStation's Game of the Year, praising how its fast-paced gameplay kept things exciting from start to finish. Meanwhile, official US PlayStation Magazine went even further, declaring Warped the best 2.5D platformer ever released. Visually, critics were blown away. The game's graphics were repeatedly singled out as some of the best on the PlayStation. Reviewers praised the clean presentation, detailed environments, and especially the jet ski levels, which were often cited as featuring the most realistic water effects seen on the system at the time. IGN described the game as drop-dead gorgeous, highlighting the animation quality, lighting effects, and smooth frame rate. GameSpot went as far as calling Warped one of the most beautiful PlayStation games ever made. Even outlets that had minor criticisms, such as the lack of unique death animations for enemies, still described the visuals as top tier, with rewarding distance, character models, and animation quality considered the pinnacle of what the PlayStation could deliver. The audio didn't fall behind either. Critics praised the soundtrack's energy and variety, noting how the music adapted to the different settings and enhanced the sense of speed and momentum. Sound effects like lava bubbling, pterodactyl screeches, and environmental ambience were frequently highlighted, and the voice acting was described as cartoonish in the best way possible. Several reviewers pointed out how well the voice work matched the on-screen animation, adding personality without becoming distracting. Beyond reviewers, Warped also made its mark commercially and historically. By February 1999, nearly 3 million copies had been shipped worldwide, with over 860,000 sold in North America alone by the end of January. The game went on to sell over 5.7 million units globally, making it the 13th best-selling PlayStation game of all time. It earned a global prize at the 1999 Mila Festival in Cannes for European revenue and became the first non-Japanese PlayStation game to receive a platinum prize in Japan for selling over 1 million units there. The success of Warped secured its place in Sony's greatest hits lineup and cemented Crash as a global icon. Even decades later, its legacy holds strong. In 2024, Rolling Stone ranked Crash Bandicoot Warped as the 4th best PlayStation game of all time, calling it the platonic ideal of a Crash game and praising its refined controls, level design, and visuals. Critically, Warped wasn't just a hit, it was the moment Crash Bandicoot reached its peak. Now, if you step away from the critics and you look at how average players felt about Crash Bandicoot Warped, the conversation becomes a little more layered, but still overwhelmingly positive. For many players, Warped was seen as the natural evolution of the Crash formula. A lot of longtime fans felt that the first game laid the foundation, the second game refined it, and Warped finally let everything come together. Players consistently praised how the game expanded without losing its identity. It still felt like Crash, but faster, smoother, and packed with variety. One of the most commonly praised elements among players is how much content the game offered. Between the main levels, time trials, relics, secret stages, and unlockable abilities, many players felt Warped had far more replay value than its predecessors. The relic system in particular stood out to fans, with some calling it the feature that turned Crash from a straightforward platformer to a game about mastery and precision. Players also loved the variety in gameplay styles: jet ski levels, motorcycle races, underwater stages, biplane dogfights, and animal riding sequences were frequently mentioned as highlights. For a lot of gamers, this variety kept the experience fresh and prevented burnout, especially compared to other platformers of the era that stuck to a single gameplay loop. That said, Warp was not immune to criticism. Some players felt the game leaned too heavily on vehicles and minigame style levels, pulling Crash away from traditional platforming more often than they would have liked. A few longtime fans preferred the tighter, more focused level design of the first two games and felt that Warp occasionally sacrificed platforming depth in favor of spectacle. Difficulty was another point of debate. Many players describe Warped as easier on a casual playthrough, especially when compared to the punishing nature of the first game. Boss fights in particular were often cited as being less demanding than expected. However, others argued that the real challenge wasn't beating the game, it was completing it. Once time trials, relics, and 100% completion came into play, the difficulty curve rose sharply, rewarding skilled players while still keeping the base game approachable. Coco's expanded role also received mixed reactions. Some players appreciated having a playable alternative and enjoyed her vehicle-focused stages, while others felt her inclusion was more situational than transformative, preferring Crash as the primary focus. Despite these criticisms, even more critical players often acknowledged that Warped was technically impressive, polished, and packed with personality. Many reviewers from average gamers still referred to it as the best looking Crash game on the PlayStation, praising the animations, environments, and smooth performance. In the end, player reception echoed what critics had already concluded. Warped wasn't perfect for everyone, but for most players, it was the perfect Crash experience. And for an entire generation, this was the Crash game that they remembered the most. Now, being completely honest, I never played Warped until making this video, and even after finally going through it, I still stand by my Crash 2 as my favorite. That said, within the trilogy, Warped is easily my second favorite. This game, having more skills and actual weapons, immediately made it feel different. And yes, there were definitely some moments where I rage quit, but if you never rage quit in a platformer or even a Crash Bandicoot game specifically, I'm going to assume you've never played these games before. Most of my frustration came from the flying missions, the racing levels, and a lot of platformers that came out in the 2000s. Racing stages became a staple to mix things up, and Warp follows that trend. The problem here is that the sharp turns and bulky vehicles made those races feel annoying at times rather than fun. The blimp shooting levels are another mixed bag. They're cool in concept, but if you're trying to go for the gems while also managing health, especially with enemy planes consistently lighting you up, it can get frustrating fast. That said, once I pushed through those sections, there was still a genuinely fun game underneath it all. And honestly, the innovation in the game is what really stands out. Being able to swim, using a bazooka, these were huge changes for Crash. But at the same time, I do think the bazooka made some of the hardcore platforming too easy. In the earlier games, you had to spin attack enemies and boxes up close. Here, you can just sometimes stand still and snipe from a distance. I had the same feeling I got years later playing Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, where Snake can just stand in one spot and shoot enemies from across the room. I appreciate the option, but it definitely lowers the challenge. Now, the running shoes, those were a lifesaver. Trying to beat the time trials at Crash's normal speed can be insanely stressful. I had one level where I missed a relic by 1 second. This was before I even beat the game. Once I unlocked the running shoes, I went back and beat the same time by almost 10 seconds. And that really shows how this game is designed. You're meant to finish it, unlock everything, then come back stronger to fully complete it. That's something Crash games have always done well. On top of that, being able to instantly see how many boxes you missed made completion feel more attainable. It made 100% completion feel challenging, but fair. When you compare the trilogy as a whole, Crash 3 is interchangeable with Crash 2 as the best entry, and I respect anyone's opinion on that. There's no wrong answer here. Whether you prefer Crash 1 for its brutal difficulty, Crash 2 for its balanced gameplay, or Warped as the perfect send-off to the trilogy, it all comes down to taste. But what really stood out to me is how Warped represents how far Crash has come. At the start of the series, Crash was about competing with Nintendo. By the time we reach Warped, he's bigger than that beef. This game feels less like a rivalry and more like a celebration of gaming itself. The references, the inspirations, the respect for other franchises, the Spyro demo, it's all here. By learning from every mistake they made in the first two games, Crash becomes a golden goose for the PlayStation. And for a lot of gamers, not just the mascot of Sony, but the late 90s as a whole. Ending the trilogy with Warped brought everything full circle. It didn't just complete the trilogy, it completed Crash Bandicoot as a product. If you made it to the end of this video, I want to start by saying thank you for rocking with me once again. With Crash 3 complete, next week we're covering Crash Team Racing, the final Crash game developed by Naughty Dog, and the last game they would ever work on the series. That officially wraps up January as Crash Bandicoot month. Next month, we continue the takeover with Jak and Daxter. If you enjoyed this video, dropping a like really helps push it out to more viewers. If you want to stay up to date with everything I'm working on, hitting that subscribe button goes a long way. And if you're feeling generous, you can always buy me a cup of coffee. Link is in the description. With that said, this is the Retro Phantom, signing out.